Mike, Carlo, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's an honor. I'm glad to chat with you about whatever it is we're going to chat about today.
Very good. We're going to chat about entrepreneurship and business leadership and your journey, your story, and all of the lessons you learned throughout these years. Um, but I want to get started with the basics. What do you do today for a living?
What do I do today? I am currently running a company called XanderPay, and it is a payments related company in the hospitality sector. And I think we're at about 8 employees now, and in the midst of a pretty big growth curve. So every day is filled with anxiety.
Very good, or not so good, but it's good. It's
Good
growing pains.
anxiety.
It's growing pains, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
what problem are you trying to solve with SanderPay and why?
So the problem that we're trying to solve is the incredible inefficiency in business to business payments in the hospitality sector. And there's been a whole infrastructure that's been designed, which really disregarded the hotels because the hotel structure is so complicated. And you have different ownership groups. A hotel brand that has 5,000 hotels may have 3,000 ownership groups. So we're trying to bring some simplicity and bring a hotel perspective to that payment ecosystem. But I could go on for hours, so I'll just stop there. And
It's good. It's good enough for the audience to understand what you're doing and what you're trying to do. And tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get there, and when did you realize you wanted to really get into business?
oh, out of grad school, I worked at an airline that soon thereafter filed for bankruptcy and did sort of corporate-y things, worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers for nearly a decade, and then did my first startup during the dot-com bubble in 2000. And it was in the food industry. It was a company called Clever Chef, and it was well ahead of its time. Um, but the timing was not very good. And we stayed in business for 5 years, and I vowed never, ever, ever to do a startup again. And after that, I started working in hospitality or in travel industry payments, first on the consumer payment side, sort of at an acquirer PSP type company. And then after 3 jobs in 27 years, I had 3 jobs in 27 months. And in that time created the vision for what has become XanderPay. And it's not been a well orchestrated or thought out plan, but it's been logical thus far.
So you worked at different places and you had more of a corporate life where you were climbing the corporate ladder, right?
Yeah.
When did you start thinking as an owner? When did you start saying, hey, maybe, I want to own my own business instead of being an employee, right? And what changed between the employee mindset and the owner mindset?
See, I don't know that there is a change. I mean, if I look back to my jobs in more corporate environments, it was a sense of ownership. In the case of Continental Airlines, it was being part of the survival of the company and owning that. And at PwC, it was really feeling like the consulting division that I was working in operations and strategy on was part of I felt like I felt a sense of ownership that was non-financial ownership. So I don't know that for me, the drive to be a financial owner hasn't really been there. It's more of an ownership of the solution. And sometimes if you have a vision for a solution, well, in the case of XanderPay, I feel like the best opportunity for the solution is as a standalone entity that I am owner of. But I don't view it as I don't view the passion as being the financial owner, and I don't view it to be a change in mindset.
which is very impressive. And let me ask you this.
It's not impressive. It's just, you don't think through it. It's not an orchestrated plan. I think there are a lot of companies that have really dedicated employees. So I don't think I'm that atypical.
I agree, but let me ask you this.
Yeah, please.
Out of let's think percentages, right?
Mhm.
What percentages of employees do you think have that type of ownership mindset in any
I,
given company?
that is an interesting question. At a company like PwC that I worked at, probably a very high percentage, 80, 90%. At some of the other places that I've worked, I do think, it's definitely less than 50% at some other places. So I think it depends on the kind of culture that's established.
And how do you, as a business leader, what would be your advice on how do you build a culture where employees really feel owners and have that drive and that mindset that comes with that ownership?
I think it comes down to empathy and authenticity. Um, I think, with our culture, I don't try to define what is a successful culture for each individual person. It's sort of listen, and we're small enough where I kind of can speak with each person and understand what their motivation is. We have team members that really appreciate flexibility with hours, so they can go pick up a kid at school, or there's or go to the gym at a point where they really want to in the day, and we sort of work through those things. So I think it's understanding what's going to make, or listening to understand what's going to make each person committed. And then it's being authentic about who I am and why I'm doing this, and what my experience is. Like, my team all understands my aspirations. They understand, the complexities of what we're doing, because we all talk about it. And I think we're all, most of the time, rowing in the same direction.
When you were growing up, I'm thinking high school, right? Was it always clear to you, even back in school, that you wanted to get into business, that you wanted to get into management? Was that a thing in your mind, or was that something that you figured
Oh,
out later in life?
I wanted to be a weatherman.
Nice.
I loved maps. I would that was sort of my long goal, was to be on TV delivering the weather forecast. In fact, my first job, when I was graduating with my MBA, I applied to this company in the US called the Weather Channel, and I really wanted a financial analyst job at the Weather Channel, and they wouldn't interview me at all. So the dreams of weather died that day. I think my family, entrepreneurship, really, if I look back, it was part of my family heritage. And I actually have not realized that until just now. So I guess it's something that was always part of life. My grandfather ran the local department store in our town, and I'm sure that was a fun job for him, or fun career for him. But over time, a small store in a small town was wiped out. So he retired before all that, fortunately. But I think the part of being in part of expecting to be part of a business was always there.
It's very interesting. In my case, in my family, in my side of the family, most of my parents and a lot of uncles and grandfathers, etc., they are mostly professional type people, right? So professionals that ended up working in different companies or for the state, etc., etc. It's like a different mindset, right? You study hard, You get very good at something and then you work for someone, right? But then I knew a
So
lot of people.
what you're saying is they view you to be a huge disappointment.
No, no, no. I became a professional. I was an attorney back in the day. But what I was, you know, I didn't think of any other way, right? I
Mhm.
didn't even consider like owning a business or getting into business wasn't even an option. I didn't even think about it, right? So it's funny how the type of things that we are exposed when we are very young, you know, at least back in the day, used to shape the way that we would think about,
Yes.
okay, what I'm going to do, right? I mean, and back in the day when I was studying, I think this changed a lot recently, but it was like in Uruguay, I mean, you would think about, okay, I can be an attorney, I can be an architect, I can be a doctor, I can be an accountant, and kind of
Mhm.
that's it, right? Uh, and later in life, you realize there are some million things you can do. And now, I lead a software development company. Who would have thought of that, right? But um, the exposure that you had maybe was helping you already broaden your mind on the things that you will do.
Yes and no. I mean, it was absolutely there was also a desire on my parents' part to make sure that I went to college. They hadn't. And so I was the first in my family to go to university. And that wasn't a negotiation. That was always going to be the case. Um, Turned out it was the right path. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. So I don't know that it was I don't know that there were a lot of choices. I think it was just you're when you're a kid, you're directed. I actually was let's say coaching or advising one of the MBA students at the university here in LA recently, and it was I mean he was nervous, which was kind of hilarious. Um, but he showed up in a suit and a tie, and I'm like wearing a pair of jeans and flip flops, and and we were chatting, and he was talking about how this is what he thinks he should do, and I was like, okay, that's great, but what do you like? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, well, I like finance. Like, no one likes finance. What do you like about finance? And then what do you enjoy in your spare time? And it turns out he's a huge car nerd. And I was like, that's great. And he's at first year MBA. And I said, Ford and GM and all the car companies tend to do extensive MBA intern hiring. So I didn't know that. Like, well, look at it. Because like, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, even if it's something as dorky as hotel payments, if you don't feel passionately about it, it's not going to be fun.
How do you feel? I many times have discussions or conversations around the pressure that exists on do what you love, and there's also love what you do, right? And I think when I was younger and we were doing, I remember being in high school, and so we were doing these tests to learn what we would like to do later in life, right? I was like, I don't know, I'm 15 years old. I would like to be an oceanographer because I like to be close to the ocean. I want to be a writer because I like books. I want to
Mhm.
be a musician because, hello, I like music, right? I want to be an attorney because I've seen enough shows on TV that it seems like they have a good life, and right, and so, um, but then you start working, and work is work, and there are boring things in whatever work you do, right? There are fun stuff and there's boring stuff, and there's kind of finding the good stuff and having a positive mindset and then learning to love what you do. What do you feel about those phrases? It's do what you love, it's love what you do, it's a mixture. How do you apply those?
I mean, I certainly think that it's easier to do what you love and to love what you do, but let's be realistic. There are days where you hate what you do and you have to do what you hate. And that's just part of being an adult. And I mean, I think, for me, I wanted to be a weatherman. I'm not. That doesn't mean I mean, I didn't do what I loved, but it's sort of like it's a lot like a relationship. I mean, there's like all this glory and happiness in the beginning of a relationship, and then the reality sets in and you have a great life together, or you don't and you find a new relationship. And I think a job is similar to that. The challenge of being an entrepreneur is it's really difficult to break up with yourself.
Very
So
true. Very
you're
true.
kind of stuck.
Very true. What do you like the most about what you do today?
Oh my God. That's a great question. I kind of love it all, which is wonderful. The team is fantastic. The solution we've created is amazing. The partners and customers that we talk to are inspiring. And I feel like I'm working on this project with an industry group. And one of the projects that we're working on is how to redefine the hotel check-in process globally by 2030, so that you don't have to give a credit card and a passport when you check into a hotel. And like it just, the technology all exists. So I I kind of love everything about my job, except for one thing. But I assume that's going to be the next question, so I'll hold back on that.
Which one is that?
It's as an entrepreneur, the absolute worst part is trying to gain the resources you need to implement your vision. And fundraising, paths to profitability, all those things are very challenging, daunting, and I think I used the word anxiety before, so I'll say angst inspiring.
Yeah, making payroll, um, managing debt, etc., etc. I agree with you. I agree with you. It's very hard. And it's also the part that I have, I have a great team, and our finance head is just the best of the best of the best. And then I also have a partner that is much better than myself about constantly thinking about that. I cannot spend too much time on it, right? I'm more of a, I want to think about growth. I wanna grow. I wanna forge relationships. I wanna spend time with customers. I cannot
Yes.
spend too much time on the, okay, how do we, where do we, how do we save money here? How do we do that? How do we, it's takes so much energy away from me. Some people are very good at it, right? But
Well, and it's one of those things where you have to do it because it's part of the job and part of being an adult. And we're at a point in our company's life cycle where fundraising in order to meet all of the objectives is critical. And the plight of entrepreneurs, and we can do a whole other podcast about what it's like to interact with the investment community and how challenging that is. And um, uh, but fingers crossed it all goes according to plan D or E or F.
is that the hardest part of
Yes.
growth?
Yes. I mean, we're in a very unique spot. We launched our business right before the pandemic, and we're in we are in the hospitality adjacent industry. So for the first 2 years of our existence, there really wasn't a hospitality industry, and it took a long time for everything to get back to where it is now. And now the great thing about our business is everything that we worked on for 3 years while the industry was shut down and then coming back to life is all hitting at once, which is a great problem to have, but nonetheless a challenge that one needs to overcome. Like we have I think 1,500 hotels actively enrolled in our company now. And by the end of the year, that number will exceed 30,000. And that's a daunting growth curve. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity, but a daunting growth curve.
Is this the biggest growth you have experienced or achieved in your career in relative terms? In
Oh,
terms of
absolutely. It was funny. I was chatting with someone, and like if you're going along and something falls off goes badly, it falls off a cliff, and everyone knows what that is. And there's no inverse of that. Like we're going along and suddenly we need to like
right.
scale a fjord or something because of the nice growth curve, which I do think is an aberration that is related to the industry, hospitality, post-COVID, and pent up innovation, I think is the way to look at it.
So you have a small team today compared to what it probably going to be, in a few months from now or a few years from now. And each of those people are key for your business, right? How do you find the right people?
Well, going back to the earlier discussions about empathy and authenticity, I think when you have a team that's built on that, and you have clients and relationships that are built on that sort of culture, it's actually not that difficult to find amazing resources. I know the next 4 people I'm hiring. They're all committed, interested, and just waiting for when we can bring them on board. And so I think, and then when you look at our team, assuming you bring the culture of empathy and authenticity to others, then they're comfortable bringing their close contacts within the industry. What's really, the worst thing a company could ever experience would be, or is, when an employee won't even refer their own friends because they don't like the role.
Very true. So empathy and authenticity keep coming back as very, very, very important concepts. Think about your career and tell me, was this something you picked up uh, at a very specific place, or did you have a leader that inspired you in this sense? Is this something that you bring with you, from the start of times?
That's a fantastic question. I think that it's always part. Well, I should say it's always part, but I think it is a learned behavior. But it probably starts earlier in life. But then I think I can think to a couple of situations where it flourished. For instance, going back to early in my career, working at a bankrupt airline, like having the empathy of understanding that we were working on the CFO at the time and I were the only 2 working on a shutdown plan for the airline, and we were there every night going through like how many more days did we have, and it was a long time ago, so it was during the first Gulf War, and like if the war had lasted 2 more weeks, would we survive? And there was an element of intense empathy for 20,000-30,000 people to suddenly be out of a job. And I think with authenticity, with a company like PwC, which is an amazing organization, but there's an element of with a lot of large companies, there's an element of towing the party line, and you really can't do that and be authentic. So you just have to learn how to share with people what's really going on, what's really being said, And I think that's a valuable lesson. Like there's nothing more demotivating to people than spewing what you're supposed to say. I mean, it's why everyone hates politicians.
Yeah. This is the phrase that I always use, which I now realize it's technology. It's old technology, but I would say play the videotape, right? I mean, don't play the
Yes.
videotape on me, right? It's nobody. Some people listening will not even know what a videotape was, but uh, don't play the
True.
videotape or don't play the cassette. Um, but you also brought another topic that I think is very interesting, and it's on leadership positions such as the one that you have had in your career and you have today. There are times where there's a lot of stress and tough decisions, right? For anyone listening and for myself, how do you manage stress during those times, and how do you build up resilience to, I mean, what you went through with the airline, very few people can go through, and it's super tough, right? How did you manage through that, and stay kind of, even if it had a toll on you, kind of survive that type of situation?
Well, I mean, I think the word survive is really critical. I mean, I think when you're in those situations, everyone has their own ways to survive trauma. And I don't think I don't recall ever seeing workforce stress designed or described as trauma. But in some cases it is. And in some cases you have you know PTSD from work situations. And I think I think my go-to with work trauma is to put my head down and work through it. But I do find that um, during those periods of time, my natural inclination is to distance myself socially from others, which is not a positive thing, but it's the survival skill because I don't that's just how I address those things. And it gets me through the stressful times. Is it the best scenario? Probably not. Is it the one that I use? Yes.
Is it because you don't want to lower your guard in a way, kind of, you are, I mean, it seems like you create your own shell, right? And you bunker down and you go through it. Um, and sometimes when you go out to different type of environments, that means certain type of vulnerability or opening up.
Well,
And or
it
am I mean, that's the cheap
no, I think there's
psychology I
some
can do on my side, right?
there's some element to that, but I actually it's weird how all of this is tying together to a couple of words, and that wasn't intended because as you know we didn't prepare for this. So I mean authenticity also. Um, I hate going out and interacting with people when I'm feeling really negative. Because I I'm not very I don't have what's the expression? I don't have a very good poker face. Like part of the flip side of authenticity is people can always read what you're thinking. And so I I don't enjoy that version, that negative version of myself. So, why would anyone else? I think that's part of it. Um,
That makes
now
sense. That makes
that
sense.
also precludes it's also a little selfish because you know I like to be there for my friends and colleagues, and I don't allow others to be there for me. um so this is the best therapy session I've ever had. Thank you.
I'm very, very, very happy. Um, what things, again, going back to your career and going back to authenticity and empathy, I find that the older I get and the more experience I have, the less time I have for things that don't make sense for me, right?
Yes.
Toxic relationships or other things, right? What doesn't make any sense at all for you today, and you're like, I don't have time for this. If you bring up this, to a work relationship or whatever, I'm going to end it because I don't have time for this. What things come to mind first in that regard?
I don't know. I don't know that I've ever really had that thought. Like I still try to engage. I, I'd like to come up with an answer for that for you, but it would not be authentic. I'm not sure. Like I don't think I've taken that approach. I mean, maybe
You don't close
I
the door. You living in just working through whatever it is.
yeah, I mean, I think you allot time differently, but I don't know that there's anything that I've completely shut off. Um, yeah, I don't have a good answer to that question or any.
Maybe venturing out, if you see that someone is not authentic and they are lying, for example, you wouldn't even consider them for your team.
Oh God, no, no. I mean, you sort of you can sense within the first. I mean, not with 100% accuracy, but you know, there are always flags that you choose to either accept or ignore. And, if you realize that you're explaining away a couple of different flags, um, then chances are you need to run away.
Yeah, agree.
And also you get to a point in your career where you don't feel like you have to be everybody's best friend. And, I've told my team if anyone is rude to you and you don't want to work with them, you don't have to. Like, even if it's a big account. I mean, fortunately, in the travel sector, specifically in hospitality, you have a really high percentage of wonderful people working in the industry because
Yeah.
they're by nature wanting to be hospitable. So we haven't really had that come across very often.
What drives you today when comes Sunday, you're thinking about the week, you're getting ready for it, you're looking at your notes and everything. What excites you about the week and drives you?
Well, I think we have a really clear objective of what we as a company want to accomplish. So it's really just moving everything forward. And when my team and I go to conferences to meet people, that is we have a very odd rule for a startup. I guess we're not really a startup anymore, but we have a really odd rule for a small company. It is to not meet anyone new, because we need to convert and deliver on our existing contacts and our existing implementations. And I think that's a really difficult thing. That was a really difficult thing for all of us to come to grips with. But the reality is when on Sunday I'm thinking about what I want to accomplish for the week, it's how do I and the team move things in a positive direction. That and when can I get to Spain next?
That's good.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I have my tickets already. Madrid, back and forth, September.
Very nice.
With Italy on the plan as well.
Nice. We have a few conferences back to back weeks in Spain and one in Germany. So it'll be a fun May and June for us.
Very good. Very good.
Yes.
Um, Technology and the future of work. What are your thoughts there? How has work changed over your career? I mean, there's remote work, there are so many things, right? But when you think about the future of work, what technologies get you excited and how you think they're going to change the future of work?
What I find really interesting is how generationally different things are. And years ago, when we were talking about payments, maybe 15 years ago, a conversation we always like to have is, well, if you want to understand how people are going to pay in the future, log into an online video game and figure out how people are buying fake islands on Sim City or whatever the Second Life, I guess it was at the time. And you're going to see a generation that's completely different. I was actually had lunch yesterday with a friend who's a realtor, and I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but the real estate sales business in the US is absolutely archaic. And you, when you buy a house or an apartment, they show up with literally 500 pages of documents, many of which you need to initial. And you look at, some of the way, not necessarily like marketplaces like an eBay um, or like an Amazon. But if you look at relationship marketplaces in business, I think fundamentally all of those roles that are old school administrative roles and the middle person in between is going to have a completely different role in the very near term. I mean, if our vision for the hospitality industry is enacted by 2030, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have front desk people at a hotel that are processing payments or telling you about, well, I know you paid for your room and tax, but we're gonna take a $50 a day hold on your card for incidentals. Which I say one hotel that didn't have any incidentals, like you don't have a kid, you don't have a restaurant, you don't have a mini bar, you don't have anything. Why are you taking the $50? But sorry for that aside. But if you go to if you look at that, like that job for that front desk team at the hotel is going to be completely different. They're actually going to be able to be hospitable and make the hospitality experience that much better. So I think to answer your question, I think the number of, I think technology will reduce the number of jobs that we think of as career options today, but it will generate new ones. The question is, how do you balance those, and what do you do as an economy to train people for those changes?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. But I like what you're saying, right? More focused on value added, more focused on human relationships and value added on that front, right? Being more hospitable, just not processing that, deposit, but just being, what do you need to make this experience better, right?
And implicitly, you can increase revenues that way by saying, our restaurant here at the hotel is great. I mean, it's here's here's the menu, and my favorite is this. Like, you can do all of these things if you have time beyond the can I have a copy of your passport?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Mike, one last question to you. What do you do when you're not working?
I'll get back to you.
What would you like to do if you
No,
have
actually,
time?
I have I live in Los Angeles, so I do like to go. I try to get in a few hour-long beach walks a week during normal LA climate. We've just had the rainiest 2 winters in ever in 150 something years. I don't know how long it's been. So that I am a sports fan, not play, just watch. And a little bit of a, I don't know. I mean, I tend to just be in my neighborhood. LA is the most bizarre place on earth and really the only place I've ever fit in. So that's kind of what I do.
What is your favorite place in LA, or when you go walk on the beach, where in LA?
My favorite place in LA, well, my favorite event in LA is July 4th, the American Independence Day. And Americans celebrate that in the evening by watching fireworks. And LA is really 8 different cities that are pushed together. They just all happen to be co-located. And so like in most US cities, you have one big fireworks display that overlooks, that overlooks the city. Like New York, it goes down the river. And here, there's nothing organized. There's no like one event. So every July 4th, my friends and I go to a rooftop bar restaurant in the Hollywood Hill or West Hollywood Hills. And you can watch the expanse of fireworks. So all the neighborhoods on the east side of LA will do their little mom and pop, backyard fireworks. And then it'll, as dusk settles, it moves from the east to the west, and you see it's sort of there. It's sort of like LA is under attack for a night. There are, explosions going off for like 2 or 3 hours, and it sort of sweeps across the city. So that's actually weirdly my favorite thing about LA.
Do you have videos of that? Anything you can share afterwards?
There is a video. I don't have it, but somebody did a drone video of it a couple of years ago. I'll see if I can send it to you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I go to LA from time to time. One of my favorite places in LA, and as you said, right, it's a kind of a city on its own, right? Right in Huntington Beach and the pier in Huntington Beach and all of that area. Definitely love that.
There's so many things. Like LA is probably the most underrated and vilified city on earth. I have so many friends from the East Coast of the US that are like, oh, I hate LA. Like, well, I've never been there, but I've seen it on TV. Like, okay, that's just ridiculous.
Which part? Which part of LA do you hate? Which part of LA do
Right.
you like? Right? It's like, yeah, it's.
Well, we're looking forward to welcoming the world to the World Cup in 2026 and the Olympics in 2028. So we can, all of your French viewers can, have this summer, and then, we'll host them in a few years.
Very good. Mike, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope we can
Been
do
really
it sometime again.
We can make it weekly.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.